morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about
feedback right after the game session.
I thought it was called feedback of the game.
That too.
Okay.
So a listener asked about feedback right after the game session or the adventure, however you want to say it. And he said that he was thinking back in the old days, probably the early 1990s, that he used to play Traveler and that the GM after each session would ask for about 10-15 minutes some questions about the game.
I think it was more in the 80s.
Might have been the 80s. Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't remember you playing Traveler in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I think you are. It must have been the mid to late 80s at this point. Where do you start off with feedback of that type? You know, what questions do you ask, and what are you after as a GM?
Just as a caution, if you don't want to hear the feedback, don't ask the questions.
Well, yeah, you are correct. I think sometimes as a GM and you ask people specific things about your game, of how it went and stuff, they might tell you the truth. And
you might not like it.
And I think you can help that, keep that from happening if you ask questions that will give you more positive feedback or more constructive feedback.
I don't think that people try to be
mean to their GM.
Yeah.
No, but it does happen, right? It does. I mean, people say, well, and maybe they don't mean it, or maybe a lot of it is context for the GM. But sometimes GMs included, have these things called feelings. Feelings.
Okay, please
Nothing
don't
more
sing.
than feelings.
I beg of you.
No, I agree. I have a terrible voice.
So it's just like with anything else, when you ask, can you read my paper and tell me what you think?
Oh, yes. Well,
can you tell me what you think about this? And then they tell you, and they're like, well, I think you could have written this better in this area. And you're like thinking in your head, well, I did the best that I could. What's going on? Instead of, okay, let me go look at it again.
I remember there's a couple instances of that happening. Once when I was I an undergrad? No. I was a graduate student, and there was this person who wrote a paper about, what is it? It doesn't matter. But the author was Shelby Foote, who wrote Angels something or other. It's a Civil War book, novelization of history. So that was a big problem, that it was a novelization historical book.
Because it wasn't an actual history book.
Correct. So this guy was wrote his paper, or I don't know, would you call it, a short synopsis of how the...
I would call it parsing it, but that's...
Parsing?
Yeah.
Yes, I understand that word. I don't know, it was a short essay on the writings of this book.
Was that the assignment?
No, the writing was pick a book and write something about it.
And it was supposed to be for history?
History. American history.
So you were supposed to pick a American history book, like actual history, not fictional history?
Well, the teacher was very open-ended about it.
Very vague.
And very vague. And most of us...
Which teacher was this?
Dr. Pickering. And then most of us picked a historical book, like with sources and stuff like that. And this guy didn't. And that wasn't even the big problem with the book or with the paper that he wrote. The problem is that it was very badly written. And it was so badly written that when we were talking about it, because in graduate class, everybody gets a copy of your...
Oh, yeah.
And then
so much fun.
And then everybody talks about it, right? And the problem was it was really hard to read because it was so badly written. And the teacher herself said, well, one, this is not really a historical book, but it does have a lot of footnotes about where he got ideas. It was about the Battle of Gettysburg or something like that. But now that I look back, like, we tore into this guy, and then he was getting upset. And I understood that we weren't being positive feedback. It wasn't positive. It wasn't constructive criticism. And there are certain ways you can criticize something and not be like attacking them. And I admit that we were just all just graduate students. I don't know if we want to make a name for ourselves with the teacher, but
I don't think Dr. Pickering would have liked that.
I don't think she did. But at the very least, the guy goes, and then I think she goes, okay, well, he got it. Let's move on to the other people's. And I'm not saying that my paper was fantastic, right? So I am guilty years ago, over 30 years ago now, easy, of this happening.
No, it wasn't that long.
Yeah, it was like the first or second year that I was at San Jose State. Okay, 28 years ago. So another time I made somebody upset because of my feedback was a lady at work. She wanted me to go over her paper that she was going to turn in, and she was going to college or whatever. And I go, okay, I'll edit or look at it. And so I grabbed my red pen and I looked at it and I marked it. And then like when she saw it that was marked up, she almost started crying. I said, no, these are just things that I would change. These are my ideas, but your paper is good. It's just everybody needs everybody needs an editor, no matter who it is. I go, I know it looks terrible, but honestly, it's not a terrible thing. These are all easy things you could fix. And after I told her about that, and I was nicer to her than I was to the poor kid in San Jose State, she understood that it was just to make the paper better, and that everybody makes mistakes like that. I go, when Jolene would, I don't think Jolene ever read it in my stuff, but when
You're talking about me in the third person.
when you, Jolene, read my stuff, you would obviously see very classical mistakes that people make when they write something.
Yes.
And sometimes, when you see all the mistakes you made, it's shocking at some point. Well, unless you're a really good writer. But for most of us aren't really good writers. So when we see that marked up paper, you're like, oh my God, I failed. But in actuality, it's just stuff that everybody does when they write papers, right? So feedback in a certain sense can be very positive and it can be very negative and make the person feel bad.
I always like an editor. When I did my thesis, my brother edited my paper. And he took crap out left and right because you're only allowed to have 7 grammatical mistakes, and that includes spacing and punctuation.
What are you talking about?
My thesis.
Your thesis, right. This is for publication in the schools, whatever.
And my brother just took it apart, and I'm like, okay, tell me what to do. I can write, but I'm not, the editing part is, you need someone to help you with it.
Of course.
So when you have a game right, that you're asking for feedback on, if you haven't had someone tear your paper apart, then you may feel like they're attacking you.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why if you ask questions or you ask
specific questions,
it will help you get better feedback, because then you get something you could change, that's something that will make you better GM, or just something that will run better.
Well, I know that we played a game last Friday, and people were commenting at the end of the game about how they would have changed stuff to make the end battle better, or the end scene better.
No, I don't think that was about the end scene. It was about had to do with something in the plot.
Well, but then again, the game had been, we had started it, and then there was a long time in between it, and we had to finish it. And at the beginning of the second session, we had to go back and remember everything that we did, which some of us were like, I don't know.
Yeah, it was tough because I think it was like almost 2-3 months.
Yeah. But everybody wanted to give you an idea because you had told us that this was something you were working on and you wanted feedback on it.
And I'm still working on it.
And so when they were giving you the feedback, you were like, okay. And you're like, well, I've already run this game and other people said, and I'm like going, well, all the clues that we got were really hard for us because we were going totally in the wrong direction for a lot of the time.
Right. And that was my fault, right? Because
I don't know if it was your fault or not.
Well, it was my fault because I didn't run the game right away. Not that, open heart surgery we'll do that to a person, but also because I think maybe I like you say, Like when the persons aren't getting the clue and I ain't going toward the clue, you move. The world moves where the clue gets in front of them, and I'm not quite to that level of being a GM where I'm that. I don't know what you call it. That
You want the people to figure it out on their own, but sometimes people can't always figure everything out the
right,
way
right.
you're thinking they will.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about the classic Dresden Files game where everybody was just at the table was like had all these ideas and they're throwing ideas at me of who the big bad guy was, sort of, and then all of a sudden somebody, well, I know it was this guy called Jonah, just blurted it out. It just the I could see the cartoon.
And you had been worried that how I'm gonna have to tell them, I'm gonna have to like just spell it out for them
Right.
because obviously I did something wrong.
Right, like, and it was an investigative game. It was Dresden Files, so they had to figure things out. But I was ecstatic when they got the clue or they figured it out. Like, wow! And then everybody, and I've talked about it, that everybody was like, yes, because it was like, it seemed to me it was super clear, or not super clear. But yeah, it was super clear that who the bad guy was or who was at fault for everything that was happening, and I had given out all the clues that I could give, and it was like when they were like, "Yes, we should have had that." It was kind of like it made me feel good because I thought, well, maybe I'm just terrible at investigative games, or maybe I wasn't giving enough clues, and that might have been true though. I might not have given one more clue or something, so that is something that you as a GM will put in your
Your
file
vault.
folder,
Yeah.
right? And say, well, okay, if I run this game, maybe another one or two clues would be good because you don't want that much consternation from your players. You don't want
Well,
that
and
hair being torn out.
not only that, but when we were playing this game, Sippy and I were standing outside with one of the characters. Our characters were not us, and you even said, "Well, I think there might be something in the office. I never go in the office." And you said it like twice, and I was like, "Oh, he wants us to go in the office," but I didn't want to be like. And Sip goes, "Okay, well, Jolene's gonna keep her busy, and I'm gonna go in the office." But I was like, "Oh, well, you're like giving us the clue without saying you need to go in the office now and look for this."
I think my biggest gripe about role playing games and sessions is the railroad, right? I don't like running railroad sessions, and sometimes investigation games will make people railroady, right? The GM's railroady because they have to find the clues. And I know I've talked about Gumshoe and how it eliminates that need to roll to come up with information. And in this case, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. It seemed that you guys weren't curious enough or had enough. What is it?
We had our own ideas.
You had your own ideas, but it was like I talked about about the office of the guy, and you're like, interesting. And then I'm thinking,
Did they not get it? But
didn't-
Sip and I both got it. We were both like, I was like going, "Okay, we need to go in the office." And I was like thinking, well, Sip's going to do that. I'll keep her busy. And then he said it. While Jolene keeps her busy, I'm going to go look at the office.
right. And then the other character was obviously was busy with the other two characters, and he was massively drunk.
But sometimes investigative games are hard. And to give it feedback on that, I mean, we had these ideas that you're like, I'm not sure that's what I meant because we were like, well, the bad guy is trying to keep the people apart, and you're like, I couldn't figure out why you guys thought that. I'm not sure that was the right way, and I'm like going, okay.
Yes. So again, when you ask for feedback, it should be something that you're going to accept and not take offense to.
And I thought, and I asked you a couple of times, were you offended by people giving you this feedback? And you kept saying no, and then our friend Morgan goes, "Well, I was in that game. You guys should have figured it out easily." And I'm like, "Oh, wow, we must be the four me, Sip, Mike, and Flute. Yeah, the four of us must be pretty dense if we're like, if other people did things different."
Like you said, you guys had this long time period between the last time you played, and so the first session was like you guys completely forgot about stuff because because it was 3 months ago, and I can understand that. And then the second one, which we just played last Friday, it was like, what would you consider it? It was like almost remembering or trying to regurgitate all that information I gave you in the previous 3 hours, and you're trying to remember it and trying to make sense of it as
And
I'm
go
giving you
forward.
more
Yeah.
information. And it was a tough situation. I was more concerned with the way the game ended, because to me, I felt I kind of just rushed the ending, but you guys felt that it was fine, that it was very,
Dramatic.
yeah,
It was a good scene.
I was worried that it was anticlimactic.
Well, no, the Mike, I don't remember the character's name, closed the door and said, "I'll take care of this."
Yeah.
And it was like
Very Coward of the
very,
County
yeah,
type.
very,
yes.
yeah.
And that's what he was going for, and I thought it was kind of funny.
It was pretty cool.
I will catch that.
But my point was that people giving you feedback, I was like, well, did that upset you that they were telling you, well, this is what I think maybe
No.
this would, and you're like, no. And I'm like going, okay, because I can see how people just randomly giving you feedback, because it was like right after the session,
Right.
they're like, oh, Saul, I would have done this, or
Yes.
I think this. And they were like all threw it at you because you had asked us to tell you what we thought, right?
I don't remember asking
Not at
you
the
that.
end of the game.
Oh,
But
okay.
Before.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't remember. But I was tired because we had gone longer than normal, like a good
Yeah.
10, 15, 20 minutes longer. And I was like, okay, well, and then I ended it late, and then everybody wanted to talk about it, and I was, okay, let's end.
I want to go to sleep.
I want to go to bed.
Well,
I'm an old man.
And so when you want people to give you feedback, like I know some GMs hand out a little form saying,
Yes.
what was your favorite part of the adventure? And
Right.
what would you have changed? Although I think that's a bad question to ask. What would you have changed? Because they could change all kinds of stuff.
So when you get feedback, there's certain things you should always consider. In this case, timing, right? Usually, and we're talking about right after the game. So right after the game is probably the perfect time to ask for feedback, because everything is still fresh in the memory of the players, and they're excited. Well, hopefully they're excited about the game that they just played in. They're excited about the game they just played in, and don't really have to like work their memory banks to remember stuff. So I think right after the game is a great time for feedback, but for you as a GM.
Unless you're tired and want to go to sleep.
There's that.
I mean, there's going to be all kinds of situations, right?
Now, another thing is that to try to be specific, right? And I put this in two different ways, but specific feedback is always going to be good feedback for you as a GM, because you're going to figure out what people liked or what people didn't like, or things that worked well. And sometimes as a GM, you think things worked well, but then the players go, well, that was really tough. It was a really leap of logic. It doesn't make sense and stuff like that. And a lot of it is kind of like when you write a paper or you write anything and you insert things into the sentence that aren't there, right, when you're typing it out. Because in your brain, you're saying,
You see the word. And
you
it's
see the
not
word, but you don't actually type it. And
Yeah.
even if you reread it, you automatically put those words in. So in that case, try to be more try to be as specific as you can for better
question,
feedback. Yeah. So along these lines is this idea of stars and wishes.
Okay.
I know that sounds kind of
Woo woo.
woo woo or hippy dippy back in the old days. Far out, man.
Okay.
But we're talking about stars, right? What?
Can you give me 5 stars for something? Is that what you mean? Like, how many stars would you give this scene? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, it's basically stars are good things that people liked about the game. You tell them, what did you really like about this game? And then they'll tell you, like, I really like this scene. I really like the way you handled this NPC. I really like this interaction between these two characters. That kind of stuff. So the stars is, what was really like. And the wishes are what,
What would you wish would have happened?
right. Or how would you change what happened? So that's another very specific thing. And when you give people those specific ideas, then they'll be able to help you.
For all the GMs listening out there, my wish for all games is if there is a bridge of any kind that you give us what do you call it? A Benny? What do you call it? A token?
A Benny, fate point.
A fate point, something, a chip that we can hand you so we don't have to roll. That's my wish for all games. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I really hate wishes, don't you? So, Stars and Wishes is something that's really propped up lately about getting feedback. And I think it's a good way of expressing it because, like,
The only problem I have with that is if you ask the open-ended question, what did you think was the best part of the game?
Right.
Or for me, I'd be going, well, there might be more than one, or I might be going, I wonder what he's looking for. Like if you ask a specific question like, did you like the NPCs in this town? Or did you like the way that the sheriff acted? Or
right.
was this clue good enough? Or something like that. But
Yeah, I understand that. And basically, but you're kind of leading the question, right? You're leading the witness.
Yeah, I understand.
In the sense that you think there might be something wrong with that situation, or you're concerned about the situation as GM. But sometimes people will give you they come out of that field and you're like, oh, I never thought of it that way, and that is why you kind of leave it
open-ended.
They leave it kind of open ended, and this is positive, right? What did you like about the game, and what specific part of the game did you really think worked? And so you can narrow the idea of what kind of answer you want, and what happens is that you're getting something positive in this situation. Now, the other part of wish is, well, what have they wished that was in the game, or what didn't work well for them? And I think, again, those are very specific things that happen. And I think when you allow the players to talk about that, then that definitely helps you, right? Because then you'll see some weaknesses in the adventure that you ran, because it's very hard to be self-critiquing.
I think a lot of the feedback might be about like, well, I didn't like the way that when I tried to roll for this, it didn't work. Or I think I should have been able to use that skill. Or, I mean, what if they come back with that? It depends. Like if you piss somebody off.
That's a pretty good memory for I didn't like this roll. Oh, the 2 hours ago, the one roll. Yeah, I think I should have been able to use my athletic strength instead
I don't
of my
see why
athletic
I couldn't
dexterity.
have jumped up that. Why did I have to roll for it?
And that does happen, right? Like
Yeah, like people get stuck on things.
Yeah, I don't remember. We were playing D&D, and somebody wanted to climb a wall,
Yes.
and they wanted to get on a roof or something. And I'm like, I had no clue as to why they wanted to do that, right? But I'm like, yeah, sure, give me a roll, and they succeeded, right? They were on top of the roof and jumping from
Rooftop to
rooftop, just to get a different angle on
view.
the situation, right? And I didn't know why they wanted to do that. I didn't think about the different view. I thought he was just trying to be sneaky or something along those lines. But he really just wanted a different point of view of whatever was going to happen, because I guess he felt there was going to be some sort of encounter or something might happen, because they were sneaking around the city.
And we were just walking down the street.
And I don't remember, but yeah, and it seemed like a very odd thing to do. But I didn't say, if I would have said, well, no, there's no reason for you to get up there. And they're like, well, I want to climb. And then somebody would say, well, why didn't you give me the chance to get up on the roof? I don't see what the big deal was. And then if I had done that as a GM, I would think, well, why didn't I let him get on the roof?
Right.
And sometimes you just do things automatically. Like,
Well,
I don't like it, or I don't think you need to do that. I don't think it would work.
It's not going to help you in any way, is what you're thinking in your head.
Yes.
But as a GM and the player wants to do it, you should let them.
Yes.
Unless there's something bad on the roof that's going to hurt them, or Like,
even then.
Well, yeah.
Even then, that's probably a positive thing, right?
They learn.
I remember Bay with the crossbow. That he you were there.
I was thinking about Bay and Felipe with the bear trap.
Well, Felipe had the bear trap, and Bay had a crossbow, and he wanted to be on top of a ledge.
And Felipe wanted to have the
big bear trap on
his back. And the GM went.
Why?
And this poor GM had no idea what he got into.
We talked about this before.
I know, but
no, I'm telling everybody.
Bay said, well, he goes, why would you want to wear a bear trap on your back? He goes, well, Bay goes, well, is it going to hurt anything if he does it? And the GM's like, I guess not.
So Felipe actually told him, he goes, if anybody attacks me from the back, they might
set off the trap
and get trapped in it. And then the GM goes, I don't think that was going to work the way you think it is. And then Bay comes to his rescue and goes, well, that doesn't mean he can't do it, does it? And he goes, I guess not. And then almost in the same scene, we're in a dungeon, of course, and this was an
organized play.
Organized play of D&D 5th
Yeah.
edition. And Bay was playing a dwarf, and for some reason there was a ledge or something, like a chimney ledge or something, and Bay wanted to crawl up, and so he crawls up there, makes his climb roll, and he goes, I just want to be up there on this, like, I don't know how tall it was. And the GMs go, that's not going to give you any kind of advantage. And that's like incredulous.
And
right?
little did he know we weren't playing for
Yeah.
advantage.
And so Bay goes, yeah, that's fine. He goes, but it's going to be cool. It's going to look cool. And the GM goes, sure. And I, being weird that we were, I'm like, yeah, that is going to look cool. And we just kind of fed off each other. We're being specific, stars and wishes and stars. And then another thing is, as a player or even as a GM, you can say, I want this to be positive and constructive, right? Even if it's like a critique of the game, it should be constructive for the GM, something they can handle. You shouldn't say,
Well,
I didn't like the adventure.
No, that's probably not a good idea. But if they're looking for something constructive and you were confused about something, you could say, well, I was confused about why you wanted us to go, or we when we wanted to go this way, or the clue, like, why did you send us like that? Like, that could be it was more of a question than a critique, though.
Right.
I don't understand why you did that.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. And that doesn't, unless you're going to tell them that information right away. Even that happened in the game, in the same game I ran for you guys. They go, well, how come there wasn't this? And I'm like, literally because I hadn't thought of it. And I'm like, well, I know, honestly, I hadn't thought of it. And they're like, oh, okay. But now I'm like, oh, to give this the scene or to make things make more sense, include what they asked about, because then they're like, oh, I would think, oh, that makes sense. This is what the goal is, and this is what the bad guys are trying to do. Okay, it makes more sense if this is included and this is there or whatever. And that is positive, because I saw that as positive critique, and they were going, well, that was stupid. I mean,
No,
those
they
kind
were
of
just
things
trying to figure out.
They were trying to figure out, right? Why weren't certain things included in the scene? And I basically was fessed up. I go, I hadn't thought of it. And they're like, oh, okay, makes sense. You know what I mean? It makes sense that, you hadn't thought of it. I go, but thanks for asking, because that makes me want to change it. And I would, and I did. So.
Well, and I still remember as feedback when we were playing in Felipe's Dragon Bane game, and you got swallowed by a sea monster. And I still remember all of us were like, we lost Saul. And none of us were close to you, right? And we're like, we lost Saul. And someone goes, Felipe. And he goes, that's what it says. And
I think I was even stunned. I go, do I get a save or anything? And then he goes, nope. I go, really? He goes, it's in the rules right here. I go, it's in the adventure. I go, okay. And then, things clicked after that.
Right. But at the time, all the players
Everybody
was like going,
he's dead.
And Felipe goes, it's in the adventure. And everybody's like, okay, well, you didn't write the adventure, so we understand that that's what it says.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that was in game. That was like we stepped out of character and we were metagaming for a minute going, Saul just got swallowed by a sea monster. But it wasn't a bad thing. I mean, you would think it was a bad thing, but you could stab the sea monster from inside every single time.
Right. And that's what the whole it wasn't good. It wasn't good for me because I was on a time limit before I croaked.
Yeah.
Literally or
figuratively.
Got burped. But it made me attacking my attacks more
powerful.
Meaningful than trying to attack it from outside. And obviously they had set it up that way.
Right. That would be a question like if you didn't realize that it was, if the GM didn't stop and say, because he knows you all so well, say, that's what it says, right? If he didn't have to say that. And at the end of the game, someone could have gone, I don't understand why you let him get swallowed by the sea monster.
Yeah. Yeah.
that kind of thing, right? And then
Right.
the GM could explain it to them or say, well, that's how it was in the adventure.
Right. And the game is pretty deadly, right?
Right.
Because and so when I got swallowed and he said that's what it is, you don't get a save. I go, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. And then things happen, and it was actually a pretty good game. And you come out of there going, oh yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
How that plays out.
Yeah. Because you can't, when you attack the sea monster on the outside, you don't do any damage. But when you attack it from the inside, you do a lot of damage.
Right, because it doesn't have armor.
Right. It's
And-
squishy inside.
And you would think, well, maybe, you're constricted and can't move, but they allowed you to move around.
Yeah.
Inside the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
And it turned out actually pretty
Kind of like the cartoons of Jonah and the Whale.
right, and it turned out to be pretty beneficial for us because I
For
got
the
swallowed.
game. Yeah.
Yes.
So those are the kind of things when the GM is asking for feedback. If you have questions, you can ask, right?
Right.
And you can go, I didn't understand why this happened, but it all turned out well.
Right. So along those lines is informal conversation because you don't want to put people on the spot, and sometimes when people you put people on the spot by asking, you're like really direct. They're like, and you're putting them. People get nervous.
That's what.
right?
Well, not even nervous, but that's like when you say, "What was the best part of the game?" I'm always going to be going like a deer in headlights, going,
Yes.
Well, I got to go back and think about the whole game to figure out what was the best part of it. Are they looking for a specific answer, or do they just want me to tell them something?
Right. And I think maybe being informal and saying, well, this is what I like to do. I like to go around there to everybody, and these are the questions I want to ask. And if you can answer, great. If you can't, it's fine. And then you kind of give them warning. You kind of give them time to think about it. Another thing is maybe before the game starts, you can ask, at the end of the game, I'm going to ask you about stars and wishes, blah, blah, blah. So always keep that in mind of what you really liked and what maybe I could work on. So when they're playing, things will stick in their brain better. And so it wouldn't be such on the spot. You got 60 seconds to answer. Please go. And you're right. Some people will just freeze up and say, and you're like, what game? I don't remember anything that happened. So I think having that conversational tone and having that just you're talking there with friends or with people who just played the game, even if you don't know them, it's always better when you're just like, so how's everybody? Did you guys have a good time? Good. So I would like to ask you specific things about the game and go from there.
It's actually easier to answer questions like that when you do know the people than when you don't.
Oh, yes.
Because you're like, I don't want to offend this guy. I just met him, right? Kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. For the person being asked.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think as a GM and you're asking that question, let's say like at the convention and you don't know these players, they may
just tell you what they think.
Tell you what they think. And you just got to be prepared for that, especially when you don't know what they're like and you don't know what their personalities are and you don't know how they if they communicate well and all that stuff. So be warned that, or be cognizant of the fact that you might be, if you ask strangers, they might have a tone or a way of speaking that may tick you off or may upset you, but you're asking for the feedback and you're asking for,
and they may not mean to be upsetting
Right.
you in any way. That's just the way they are.
correct.
Because not everyone is as tactful as the people that you know, Saul.
Right. So I think there's all kinds of things about feedback that are positive for the GM, and I think they can make your game better, especially right after the session, right after the adventure. Give the players an idea or give them the idea that at the end of the session, at the end of the game, I'm going to ask you a few questions about the game, and these are the kind of questions I want to ask.
I would suggest that if you're going to do that, like at a convention or something, you have a little form like that you either hand out with their
Yes.
character sheet at the
Yes.
beginning, or you say, "Oh, at the end of the game, I want to give you this because I want to make the game as good as possible
Right.
for every time for the next time I run it.
Correct.
I want to know if there's anything that you thought." So, and that way you don't have to directly ask them the question, especially if you give it to them like just with their character sheet. Then for someone like me who is like, "You want me to tell you something right now? I need time to think about it."
Right.
And I know there's other people out there like me. So,
And don't make it a long questionnaire.
Yeah.
Be real simple.
yeah.
Just 1, 2, at the most 3 questions, because that's what you're going to read and that's what you're going to take home. And you're like, okay. And hopefully between 3 and 5 players that you have at your table, maybe more, you're going to get a good mix of ideas and a good mix of things that people liked and what people think might need some help in or might not work as well.
I would say my favorite part of the game is when the mimic the chest was open and it was really a mimic and everybody had to run.
Exactly. Things that surprise people and people to go take them back a little bit. That's always going to be stuff that people remember, or, just highlights that you may think that this encounter or this scene might be a throwaway scene, but you might be surprised. People might really enjoy that scene where you're thinking about taking it out or probably not doing it in your next adventure. People say, "Oh no, this is a keeper,"
Yeah.
And it might surprise you. It might surprise you what they liked and what they thought was a very good part of the adventure.
And sometimes when they tell you what they liked, it may have been something that was just improvised at the table,
Right?
That somebody you got an idea, they gave you an idea and you let them run with it.
And then you got to remember that, so you write it down.
Yeah.
And then you have something to remember, or something to think about when you run that next game.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
Any other ideas?
Not right now.
Okay. So good luck with getting feedback for your games. Have fun. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.